Hi everyone, welcome back into the studio. Well, you ready to paint the snowy owl? So hopefully you've watched part one here where I've introduced just some of the mixing of warm and cool colors that we'll use onto the owl. Now, it's like my daughter always pushes me to say, set a goal. And she is so right. Set a goal of what we want to do with this particular painting, which is what some of the stuff that I did in number one with you, using those textures, advancing it. I love just about everything on this photo. Now I have it up there on my monitor there too. And then I have the photo right there that I showed you guys in part one. And you can see the photo is a little bit more yellow than what the monitor is showing up there too, so you're going to get a difference. I'm going to come probably right between. I think the monitor's a little blue for me, but it helps me see the cool colors. And the other one is probably just a touch too warm for me, so I'll come right in between the two. I'll show you what we're going to do. But the first thing is set that goal. So what I want to do here is, this is a bigger board. This is like 32 by 21, I think it is. It's a big board. You can take it to any size that you want. I'm going to work the background first because of simultaneous contrast. And simultaneous contrast, I've showed some of you in the past what it is color affecting color. So if I darken this background, everything that is in relationship to the owl is going to look lighter. And it's just like this, okay? If I take this white, and let's darken it down with a gray color that we're going to be using today, the burnt sienna and a little green. So we'll make this color, right? And if I come out here and if I put this color, let's just put it here because we'll use this. If I put this color right here, it looks like, you know, it looks a little bit dark. But then if I take this color and if I put it right onto a darker background here, you'll see it looks like a lighter color. See that? It looks darker here, but it looks lighter here. But it's the same color. That's called simultaneous contrast. And that is something that artists need to be aware. So how many times have you painted something and then you put on other colors and all of a sudden everything's gone too light or looks too white or something like that? Or what happens a lot of times when we're painting white, and this is the big problem with white, is people will not have enough darks to begin with, and they keep putting on white and keep putting on white and keep putting on white, thinking they can make it lighter, lighter, lighter. And it's the reverse is what you need. You need deeper shadows. So I'm going to start out, I'm going to put in some of my background, which is going to cause my owl to look lighter, and then I'll have a better chance of seeing him. Does that make sense? Okay. So what I want to do is I love in the photo that we have here, this blurry background and stuff on him. You can get the idea of some back prairie, some trees. This is actually like you took this in the backyard out there at the farm, and it just looks just like that with the snow and everything. I like that effect, so I want to do that. And I may, since mine is longer, put a few prairie grasses and stuff like that up towards the end. I'm not sure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, this is just a quarter. It's a big sponge, tile setter sponge. You get this in the tile setting department of your local home store. And I got it damp, just damp. And I'm going to take some extender medium and I'm just going to pour this right into this sponge. And then I'm going to go right over my surface here with this extender medium. I'll even just go right through that. But the surface here, I have this prepped with the canvas prep medium. So it does have a little bit of tooth to it, but I'm going to want this to stay wet for a while. And the extender, when I put it on here, depending on how thick I put this on, I can get it to stay wet for a couple hours. I don't need that, but it can stay wet for a couple hours. Now, I don't want any puddles or anything like that. I just want kind of an even coat, and I'm going to work my colors. And I use this, now why the extender? Sometimes you see me do this, sometimes not. This is just so I can blur out some of the initial colors that I'm going to put on, all right? So let's find some of the colors. First one I'm going to find is this blue. And when you're finding the colors in acrylic, what you do is you find that, because acrylics dry about 10% or about one value darker. So you come up here and you say, well, that is right down around a 6 or so. It's not quite as dark as a 7. As a 5. It's right about a 6. So I really want to have it up around a 7 when I mix it, because it's going to dry down about 10%. Unlike oils, acrylics dry down just a bit. So when you mix a color, you should have it just a little bit lighter if you're going to find that color, find something close. This is more of a blue-violet, and so I'm going to take a little bit of my quinacridone, and I'm going to take some Phthalo Blue, and it's going to take a lot. But I want to be able to manipulate this color, so I'm not going to like mix up tons of it. I'm going to paint it. I'll paint the background several times during the painting, but I want to get it right up about a 7 or so. So that's going to be pretty close because it's going to dry down. Now, it's also just a touch bright, so I want to neutralize it. And my main neutral colors from number 1, what we talked about, was to use the burnt sienna and the the pine green. I love those. So I'm going to neutralize this down here. I'll take a look. It's probably a little too gray as I'm getting close, but I'm really, really close to it here. And it might, let's take a look at, put it out a little bit so you can see it. Put it out next to this here so you can see it. It's a little lighter. Okay, it's a little lighter, and I'm not quite as violet. I could have a little more violet. I could just brush mix some of that in as I put it in. I think it's pretty good to go. So I'm going to take a larger brush, some extender, and I'll work through some of this color, and this is what I'm going to push out into here. And see, this is the thing. Look at this. When you look at this out through here like this, it looks pretty close to that, you know, to that color that I have there. But it's going to dry a little darker. So, and I might want to, that burnt sienna, I put it in there. It lightened, it darkened it a bit. So I might want to have this just a touch lighter here. And we'll push it. Now, this is good. As you can see, the surface is wet. See how everything slides really nice? That's what I want. And I want to put on quite a bit of this color real quick. And I'll remove it back off of the owl where I don't want it. So this is a 2-inch wide brush. And I love it. This is my fusion brushes that I really love here. And so let's go back here now. And I'll leave some of it in some areas here on the owl, but I'll take off some of it as well because it's your background. Everything in your painting relates to your background. And so just like we do with the glaze, I don't always mind having a little bit of that on my owl here to push some of that harmony. Sometimes, especially where we're going to have those shadows and stuff, guys, we're going to have those down here. So sometimes I will just take some of that sky, because everything relates to that sky, and glaze the lower part here. Not so much that I lose my drawing here, but I'll glaze the lower part. We also now, down through here, have the snow. And the snow has tones of the sky. So let's just lighten this up a bit more. Okay? And let's drop some of that right down. And I'll use all kinds of motions of my brush here to push in some of this snow here, and quick. And I want areas, what I call the highs and lows of paint. I want areas where the color's a little thicker, some movement. This just gives atmosphere to our painting, and that's what I'm looking for. You'll see me a lot of times in big paintings and stuff, putting stuff on and say, I move my brush in all kinds of directions to create the atmosphere, the movement. And that's what I'm doing here. So this is just a nice soft color. It's related to the sky. It is the sky. It's just a little lighter. So we'll put some of that in down here. So let's get that just a bit lighter in some areas here. Just model. And this is the softness I'm looking for. See, with that extender, I've got lots of working time here with this. And so I can just work some of these whites and get some of these various values here. Remember, you're painting ground here, so you want to have a few horizontals, a few more powerful horizontals. Now, okay, so that's in there. I'm going to step down to a slightly smaller brush. I'm going to come right over here to the side, and I'm going to take some of my burnt sienna. Maybe a little bit of that green, which helps gray that, okay? And we're going to look, and that's really, really close to this other color that I have here. Maybe just a touch of the blue in there, and we'll see where we are. Pretty darn close to that color. but we're going to want some modeling in it, some different looks to it. So I'm going to come in here and just push this around and drag some of this down. This is the blurriness of the background that I want. Sometimes you might want to just pull some horizontals, because this is basically bushes and stuff like that. Mix up some more. Doesn't have to be exactly the same. Push some of that tone around. We want these tones here. Okay, so we're looking at that as it comes this way, pulling that through. Sometimes you'll see me pull, to get some interest like this, pull paper towels through. A little different than what you see in the photo, but this gives it like almost the look of the grasses, prairie grasses and stuff like that here. And we'll push some over here. But, you know, this is going to help us with our idea, our plan, and we can always add more, which is what I'll do. I'm going to come back and add more into this later on. I just want to start the feeling or progressions of it. Let's go more. Burnt sienna, green here. And we'll go a little bit more blue into this. This gets a little darker as we get up towards those trees and stuff that are there into the back. We'll push this sideways just a bit here, because there's a lighter little bit of light band that's coming through the background there on that side. So we'll push that in. And then we'll work these tones, darkest tones of all, right up through here. I'm going to come right up to the edge of my owl. This is where it's really going to push the owl forward. This is that real dark. See that real dark, but it's mottled and it gets a little bit more blue and toned in there. Okay, and I'll do that. I want some of these tones. And I'm going to give the impressions. I'm going to go up like this, and I'm going to give the impressions of some of this being trees, tree lines back here, and softening out here. I want some of this movement here. And this is what's really great about the 2-inch wide fusion brush, is I'll take that here, even a little bit of my sky and stuff. I'm going to pull this down now, or pull this until I have it not completely dry, but set back, and this is what I'll blur with. So this is what I call blurring. I'm not eliminating, I'm not blending, I'm blurring, I'm softening through the painting. And if I want to pull colors down, I work this way, like this, and that pulls, and then I do some verticals and some horizontals as I blur those colors into the background there. Sometimes you'll see me come back, which is really great, is with a knife and work that through to bring some areas a little more mottled interest. So you can see more modeling interest in that. And I can soften through and leave some of those different variations of tone. So like in the photo, you'll see maybe a little more like burnt sienna right in here. Now I can come back in just like this, see, and push that in. And right up around here, around the head of that owl would be kind of nice to have that. And then I'll blur through that. Just blur through that a few times. You know, maybe pull some of that down. And so I can increase some of that movement. I am in control of this. You know, this back top here, I want it to kind of fade away. But maybe I want maybe a little bit more right up through here. So I work that, see, and I get highs and lows and stuff like that. And then I can blur through, and I can give it the look more of the trees and stuff like that way. And it works really, really well. I can come down here like this and add some of that, like right down in here, like that's going to be, you know, some of the ground and grasses and stuff like that, and blur through and add that interest there, right like that. So what we do, see, when you get that done there, see, is you're creating that look here of what that's going to be. And of course, we'll do it up in the front. So it's a combination. So the main technique I'm using here is the blur. To blur, you need those values wet. Now, if your acrylics dry really fast, and if you have good quality acrylics, you can still blur after they're dried with water, because water is your solvent, okay? So you can still do that. So let's add a few areas of interest right over here, and I'll blur through this, okay? And I'll just pull through. So what I'm going to do now is, you just give me a few minutes, I'm going to do this. I'm actually going to put some of the blur, some of the same thing, into my blues, maybe a little more blues here and there. I want to concentrate on getting some of this softer. Let's put a little extender right around up in here, because we see some of that come up by the owl right up here, like a little tree line or something like that. And some of that interest right up there like that. So he's popping through. So you see that right up into there. But that's how I do it. And if I want more interest, I'll get right up there with that knife. Now see, like maybe I want right up here by his head. Maybe I want just a little bit more. Tap that around in there. Get a little color, Dave. It's easier. Push a little color in there. And then just lightly blur that here. Boom, like that. And if it blurs, that blurred pretty fast. Did you notice how that blurred pretty fast? It's because I had added that extender there, and it thinned it just a little bit. And you'll feel that. If you want to blur slower so you can watch it as you're doing it, keep your color that you're tapping into there thicker, okay? All right, so I'm just going to continue on here for a minute and fit this in. And I'll take a little bit of this color, just dirty on my brush, right down here into my snow, just like this. And then I'll come back with some of that snow with my knife, which is what I like to do. A little bit lighter, maybe a little bit of this color here, and I'll look. See, yeah, there's areas where you're going to have a little thicker, like snow and stuff coming through. And you've seen me do this in the westerns quite a bit. And I'll push this through, and that will start to give me this highs and lows of the snow. And I can blur that if I want to as well, just lightly. Blur it like that, and I'll get these highs and lows and up to like that, okay? So give me a couple minutes. I'm not going to take any more than 10 or so, but you don't need to see that. And I'll work some of these colors around, and then we'll come back, and we'll start the owl, okay? And always say to yourself, I'm going to come back. That keeps you from going too far, okay? So I will come back onto this. And, you know, you will take some of these soft colors maybe and push some of that right back up in here. You know, it's carrying colors. Remember, I always talk to you guys about carrying colors. Look for ways to move your colors. See, I'll move those colors through there and just softly give the impressions of that, okay? All right, so give me a few minutes. I'll get that done. I'll be right back. Hi everyone, welcome back. Okay, so I just took a few more minutes and did that. Then I put just a little heavier blue up into the sky. Now, odds are you might have to come back and you know, refine that, or you can put in more interest by, you know, like you've seen me do before, coming on top of this. But we're going to wait until this dries, because I've got a nice blur to everything, which is pushing it all back. And I don't want to lose that. So I'm going to let everything dry. Now, what I also did was I took all my colors when I'm done here, and I just pushed them right over to the side. We've got to make that warm and cool gray. And remember, that real warm gray that we made in part 1 was the burnt sienna and a little bit of green. And you could add some yellows to it and stuff like that. But that made that really nice gray that we found, you know, in the owl himself, in the warm areas. So it made that, remember, that warm gray that was right up in there, so that we find. So that's pretty nice for a warm gray. And so the gray I have here is pretty cool, and so it's really nice for that to be kind of on the cool side. However, it's just a little bit for, like, the underside here. It's just a little bit too blue. Do you see that? It's a little bit too blue. So I want to warm that. So I can even take some of my warmer gray here, which will change that. We'll get rid of some of that blueness to it right here. Do you see the difference? It's a little bit warmer. So A good way sometimes that I do it when I'm going to do a painting that is going to get a lot of interest, and I look at that color and I see it's a little bit off. It's not quite coolness. I'll go ahead and put it in and then model it, what I call model, work back through it with some warm color to adjust it into the position that I want to see it. And you leave that modeling of that color. Remember in part 1 I told you about the underside of that wing. You're going to see these warmer colors and the cooler colors, and you get this whole area of mottled color right in here like that. Okay, and so we're going to work those two colors together. So, and that's one way in which I like to do it. So I can either adjust it here, which is one way. This is going to be pretty close. This is that shadow area right in here, and I'll be a little careful up and around his face. But I'll do this. I'll model this in as I'm working. I'm going to leave that a little bit more blue there by his tail. Maybe even just streak a little bit of that through. But remember, that's that real blue area. And you might, you know, depending on what you see, you might do this. Hit it with just a little bit of that warmth and see you get that mottled area through. Also, even in a shadow, those of you that study the color theory and stuff, when we talk about shadows, you've got the lights, reflected lights and stuff like that of shadows. So you will end up taking some lights through, and this is what I call the modeling of the painting. So when I'm putting this in like this, you'll see the colors change. That's what I'm looking for, that changing of the colors, okay? Now, so I'm going to put this in a few of the, let's take a little extender. Let's take some of this. This is a pretty good value here. Let's just work this just for right now. This isn't the shape. We're putting in some color areas here that we're going to work color into. So, you know, this is going to cool down in here on the tip of his wing. We're going to take some of this bluish. Remember, it was a little bit more blue. And right up in here and on the top part of his head right up here, we saw that in part 1 where that came down. So I'll push this down. So I'm looking for some of my shadows. And rather than paint the lights, I paint the shadows first because he's going to be mostly white. But see how I'm pushing my fingers here? Thank goodness this is nice non-toxic acrylic. If you're using oils, then make sure you use a brush. Don't use your fingers. But yeah, I'm looking for that modeling that's there. And sometimes I'll grab some of my whites, some of my warms, some of my really warms. I'm not going to go as light as I can, but I might clean up that edge of that front edge of this wing here, right up here. And you know, I might want to put in a little bit of a texture in that, just a bit. But this is what's really, really going to cause his wing to advance. I'm going to adjust that edge there too with the background there. But I might just drop in some of this color. A little bit of texture is fine here, just to get a good read on it, and so I can see some of the lights and darks. So I do this sometimes. Maybe leave a little bit of a fractured edge there as this comes down. And all of this, you know, a lot of people say, okay, paint the darks, then paint the lights. And sometimes I paint the lights and paint the darks. I go back and forth. A lot of times, you know, you're painting, and everyone's going to say a different way to do it. But a lot of times when I get into painting, if I'm having trouble seeing something, I will go ahead and paint it and put some color in there until I can see it. So I really want to be able to see his face and advance this area up. And so I'm going to take some of my burnt sienna, my green and my blue, which I made for those dark areas there. And this is almost dry there, so I'm going to come back in. And this is the area that I really want to get dark. And excuse my head in the video, but I've got a little bit of glare because of that extender, so I have to look on that. So look over there. So I'll push that in. This is that real, and you'll notice there's a real dark. As a matter of fact, there's a real dose of like burnt sienna right in here, that warmth that I really want to, I love that in that part of the painting right there. And I want to grab that. Now look how that starts to pull him forward. Then I'll just take my soft brush here. And I have to be careful because I rinsed it. So it's got a little water in it. So I got to be careful that I don't do this too much. It'll pull a hole because water's your solvent. So I just got to go lightly through this. And blur it. And what the other word I use, you'll hear me use all the time, is incorporate. Push the colors until they just start to soften and not blend out, but soften out, blur out. Okay. So now you can see I can work that. I can work that edge of this wing. I'll go to a slightly smaller brush here. Work this edge of this wing for just a moment, dropping this out here. And you'll see that that wing, that's a very important part of the painting right in here, because this wing, the lightness of this wing going up into this shadow area here and stuff like that, and that's the area that we're looking right in here, see? Right in there. That's that area right in there. That's where we're trying to capture some of that so that we can see where that owl is going to come really quite a bit forward, okay? So sometimes I will put on some light, especially get that light dark contrast, and you know, I'll work that. Now, the question is, do we want to recede this edge, which means it pushes back just a little bit, and we do that by fracturing the edge slightly there. And artists do it a bunch of different ways. We don't want this edge so sharp right now that it advances that wing up in front of the head. So I'll just take a little dark. I pushed it with my finger there. I'll just take a little bit of dark and just run it right on the edge there and see how that starts to break up that edge. Break up that edge ever so lightly with tone, and that will push it back. Edges, sharp edges come forward, and the relaxed edges set back. So I may want to just relax that edge just by running some color over it so it gets a little bit not quite as sharp, or run into it a little bit. Run into it like this to break that edge so it's not quite as sharp. And see, that starts to and it makes that edge more painterly. And I've told you guys so many times in all of your paintings, what takes your paintings to that higher level, not only is this warm and cool that we're learning, but it's also those edges. Everything is about edges, okay? So remember that. So we have that. So let's take some of this, because I like this bigger brush, but actually I should probably use, I'm going back and forth between flats and filberts here, mainly. Let's take some of this cooler color. We'll add a little extender to it here, okay? And let's just look up there. Yeah, we have a nice big stroke of it right up here as the cast shadow from the top part of this, or the folding over wing, as this is going to come down this way. We'll push that right into there like that, okay? And let's look. Now, see, this is the great thing, okay? And I don't know if you can see it on that monitor, but when I look at the photo, you know, I see the warm and the cool stuff. But when I look up there at the monitor, I see the actual direction of the wings, his muscles and stuff here that are pulling back down this way in that wing that I don't see in the photo. And that's why I love the monitor. I like looking at the monitor. So I see that movement. So, and it's that movement that tells me as the artist which is the best way to stroke something. And I also see that dark, the wings folded up there. It's hard to see it in the photo, but there's a little triangle shape of dark that actually comes from the trees and stuff back there, right up in there, in this part here. And so I'll just put on some of that modeling right in there, like that, and kick that through. So we have that shadow. Let's take some of this gray and some of this right in here. Maybe even a little blue and violet. As the shadow gets darker and cooler, I like to head to the violets. I showed you that in part 1 of this. And I'm going to push that darker little violet. This is the back as it's heading to his main flight feathers, his primaries. And it's pushing right up in towards his muscles there. So we'll push that shadow in there. Okay. We're going to have other little winglet feathers coming back up over this way. But a little bit of that violet, maybe even a little bit more brighter violet. So once I carry that color like into one area, and you see me on part one when I showed you the floral, I do it all the time, is I'll take just a little, maybe slightly different version of that, just a little bit through some of that other color, just to put that color. Now see, that little bit of violet, it just changes that blue just ever so slightly. It's really, really nice. And so I like to do that. So it's just varying your cools. Look at the variety of the cools that we have coming in there now. Okay, now let's come over here. Let's grab a bit of our warms, but we should have a little cool with this too. So right in between, and let's come right in here, and we'll push, and we're looking to model. We're looking to get some of the tones in here, and then we'll paint the structures and stuff in there as well. So we're looking, you know, when you're looking at doing that, you're looking at trying to capture, you can see those warms and those cools, and you can see those warms get maybe a little bit of cool right here first. Let's do that. A little bit of cool right there on that edge. And then we'll warm that just a bit, model that through, a little bit lighter. I'm looking, I always have the photo down by what is it, I'm looking for that, well, I hit it pretty cool, that tone right in there. But it's acrylic, it's going to dry a little darker, so let's go just a touch lighter, pretty close to that. We'll push that in, we'll model this in, follow some of those structure strokes here of that inside wing there. And you know, those aren't done. This is just our first look at it, you know. Let's drop in some more of those strokes back in. I want to have a little more structure to them. I can blur them. I like to use my fingers. And there we go. Push that in. We got a long ways to go, but I'm looking for those kinds of variations of those shadow tones. Let's drop that cooler blue-violet down. So I'll come over to this side. And remember I showed you that on the part one, that real cool blue-violet area that is right here on him. And so it's got a little bit more violet. Let's go a little red-violet into that. Let's drop some of that right down in here. That might be a little too dark. Let's lighten that value just a touch. Remember, it's going to dry darker, so let's lighten that. That's better. That value up just a bit. And this, you know, what I always say to everyone is, this gives me good benchmarks of color. You know, they don't have to be absolutely perfect. And my mark that I'm putting in there doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but I've taken my painting a step towards where I want to go. Does that make sense? It is so hard to hit the exact color right away and then, you know, and then keep moving. So what you do is you say, okay, part of your plan is I'm going to step towards it, I'm going to head towards it, and then I'm going to look, see what needs to be changed. Is that a little too red? Is it a little too blue? What do I need to change to get it closer to my final subject? And, you know, that's what I do, is I work towards it. I work towards the goal of getting there. And so I'll take some of that color, though, and this is what I always believe in doing. After I've established it, I move it. I always move the color through some of those things. So the color you'll see pick up and move into a few other areas, okay? So I'm going to model through some of this down, move this downward stroke here a bit, because that's the way the wing goes. And that's got a pretty good movement on it. Not perfect yet, but so it's in shadow, but there's one little place here, and I want to paint this. I love this one little place on him, and it's going to be right up here in the front, and that's where that warm light hits him right there, right for the shadow. And then you're going to see that shadow cast down from that upper wing down onto his body. So I want to create this warm light, a little bit of yellow, into this, my gray, my warm, and I want this to get light, and it's up there right around a 9 or so. I got a little blue there. That's not going to hurt anything. This is just my first look at it. And so it's going to go right up about by this arch right here. And it can be a little lighter. And it's going to go right down like this. And this is going to be, this part of the wing is going to be right up here in this sunlight here. And I can be a bit lighter. So I'll just come off here to the side, grab a little white, just tap through that color so I can lighten this up here. Stroke through. And I'm going to actually just, you know, kind of leave some of these streaks and strokes because this is my first look. So I don't want to smooth out, if that makes sense. I don't want to get too smooth because the bird is, as we paint him more and more and more, he's going to get smooth, you know, so I don't want to get too smooth. I'm going to take a little bit of that warm, a little bit of that gray, a little bit of this shadowy color, reset this nice curvature right in here. Right like that. Pulling right down. Set some of that in. So we'll catch that wing just a bit. It's got to, I need, one of the things I've lost there on the wing is that arch. So I want to take some of this background, which was the blue, the green, the burnt sienna. And this is why I say you're going to paint this background several times, especially as you start to correct some of the structure of your subject here. I got to correct him in a couple of areas, and I like to do that more than anything else with background. So I want to get a bit more of a curvature here, and this dark will actually make this light seem lighter right up in there. And it's a little too dark, but I don't worry about that. I'm going to take a little softer color here, and we'll work this out. And you see, and this is what I do. So I work this out, right? And immediately, and I start to work it out. I realize I'm on the wrong tone, slightly on the wrong. But I'm going to do that because this is where the interest of the painting goes. Now, looking at that tone, how wrong do you think I am? I'm a little green. Does that make sense? I need to have some of that warmer burnt sienna. So I'll just step over here to the side and put the burnt sienna, maybe a little bit of this into my brush here. And I got a glare right there. So one reason why I don't like working on all the time on the extender, because I'll get a glare. So I'll push that in. Now you see it get a little closer there, right? And then I can always take my big brush here, just like this. Excuse my head as I lean, as I get past this glare. And I'll blur that in, see? And so I solved that. And I want to take just a bit of this color, just a bit, maybe push some right up in here. So that edge right there on him is not quite so perfect. And we'll just blur some of that out there. There we go. Get some of that edge right in there. So you'll see him coming forward. But now I get this arch, and I don't want that arch quite so perfect, so I'll just blur it a little bit for right now. But you can see how I work it back, okay? So a lot of times in a painting, you see me paint the background and foreground. Now, even though I finished all this blur, this is just a nice set for a blur. But I'll come back in and work other colors and work to it. Now, look at that. That color goes with it right nice. I might, just like, because I love that burnt sienna right there. I don't know. In the last few years, I've been a real big fanatic of burnt sienna. And I love burnt sienna. And so I'll push that burnt sienna in there. Maybe we'll push a little bit more burnt sienna right up in this small little area here. And you can see, yeah. See, I love that little, and I'll take some of this off and model it up. Model means I just tap through it, try not to blend it a little bit, but just get some of that modeling through. So now you see that. So we're getting some of these nice shadows on him. We're going to take, let's get some of these shadowy blue violets right up here. It's closer, maybe a little bit more to the blue here. And let's push, and I want to thin this out because I don't need very much of this, right up into this area. Matter of fact, sometimes I'll put it on like this and just glaze it on. That's just real close, right where that should be, because, see, this is what I'm looking for. This is real soft a real soft kind of gray color there. Do you see that? Right there on that tail. And so I'll push that down, and let's push down this part in his eye here. Now see, this is where I'll end up. So I kind of I did it a little bit too heavy there, so I'll back this out just a touch with that paper towel. And if I need to, I'll push back into that. I don't really need to, but I can push back into that wing. I want to define this shadow just a bit more. I'll push back with that lighter wing color right there, just like that. Okay, but I really don't need to. I've got just the edge of just what we call form shadows. So I'm just going to take some salt. It doesn't even have to be quite as dark and stuff here. This will be what we call form shadows. And I'll do it with just a real light glaze like this, which will help me see where his forms are. And you can see in the, like in the photo down here where you're getting between his two legs there, it gets a little bit more warm, burnt sienna kind of color in there, which is really kind of nice. So let's just go ahead and impart some of that right up in here. That nice deep, and then that's a nice deep color right in there like what it's supposed to be, but let's just blur that out a bit. And so this is where I take my finger, and you see me do this in roses and stuff all the time. And I learned to do it in roses when I started painting wildlife, taking that finger and just blurring that out when I was, and looking for those different kind of edges there. That color gets a little bit more yellow. Let's add just a touch of extender. I add the extender in the very beginnings here just to keep the colors a little thinner. I don't really want at this point, I'm looking for tone, for color, and I don't want to get too much textures because too much texture is too hard to paint over later on in the painting. Okay, so I try to avoid that. But let's just take a bit of that. That's a beautiful little tone that's going to pick up into a few little areas here, right up into here that I see, and right up. So a little bit of extender, just keep this color kind of thin right in here, right up in there. Okay, and you can see by leaving that white of this, we're starting to find the shape and stuff here of our owl before we even start the beautiful painting and the textures and stuff of him. We can start to see the colors, and it becomes basically your color map for him. Let's take some of this beautiful color, finish off the lower part, which is going to cause his head to advance right up in here. Tap some of that through, right? And so this is yellow and my cooler gray, my medium gray, and some burnt sienna. And then we'll take our warmer gray here. Let's thin some of this out. We'll lighten it up here a little bit as well. We'll come through. This is that warmer gray area that we liked on him. And we'll tap some of that through right in there. Put some of that color in. I see now some of that color right down in here. And you'll find that happening as you start to paint him. You'll start to see areas, other areas of that tone. Okay, now in the original he'll have more yellow here. Over there he has more of the bluish kind of tone. So I'm going to go right between the two of them there. But let's get this tone down, a little bit of it right back up in here before we head to the shadow that's cast on his body from that wing, which is going to be back into our grays. Let's look. We'll take some of that warm and some of the gray. So we got to create that color that's right in there before we go dappling up his body. We'll get some of these shadow tones in here. That is going to be the shadow from his wing. So this top part here has to line up right there with that shadow, because the shadow is a cast shadow here. Then we'll do a few bands of light and dark. We'll refine this. I'm just looking for the tone right now of where that shadow is. We'll refine that. let's deepen that, darken that, blue that. Sometimes the blue, I like a blue, a violet, maybe some burnt sienna in it. Makes a real nice kind of dark. I don't want to go that dark, so I'll lighten it just a bit. A little bit more burnt sienna. Cooler gray kind of color that we'll push into this cast shadow here. Just a bit of that. Not perfect, and I'm off just a bit, but that's okay. I'm starting to find where that shadow's going to be, and then that shadow's going to change and go a little bit lighter. This is just my first look, guys. I don't worry about that shadow. Will go a little lighter, warmer right in there. We've got a long ways to go, but see, so that wing is casting this shadow. Now, sometimes I will take just a thin glaze. If you can't see it and you lose it, you just take a thin glaze and you pull it down over the whole thing till you start to see where that shadow is casting over, and then that will sometimes help you see the cast shadow here that's coming there on that particular part of him. But we have a little bit more gray, so I'm just getting in here the lights, the darks, where the shadows are located, and then I'm going to, believe it or not, I'm going to let him dry up here, and then we're going to come back and paint his face and stuff here too. So I got a pretty good read on it. There's a little bit more of this cool, not quite cool, a little bit of this other gray, and thin. We have to be thin, so I thin it out with some extender, and let's just lightly cast on some of this color. See, what happens is I eliminate more and more of the white through the painting. The areas of white are going to come forward. So, and when we come back after I let this dry, watch what happens when I take that real warm light, okay, and I come in and I start to push that right into here. See how that brings his head forward? Do you see that? So I'm painting in this shadow, and what kind of contrast is that called? Simultaneous. I'm painting in these shadows so that when I come back here, after I let this dry, and I start doing this, you're going to really see his head pop forward here as we start to paint that. So, but I have a few other little things to do here first, but I might take just a bit of that and pop that right back in there again. I love that shadow. I mean that highlight on that wing right there. So you can see that. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to go have a little bit of lunch. And then I'll come back and we'll start to detail him and start his lights and darks, some of the bands and stuff, and start refining him, okay? He's got to dry up here first, though, so I don't disturb, because I'll just keep picking up color. And I like it to dry up, okay? All right, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Hi everyone, welcome back. Okay, went and had some lunch and let this dry. It's still wet up through here and stuff, but overall this gives me a nice surface now I can work on and do the next layers without disrupting it. The problem is that when you use a lot of white and you come back in on something and it is that area is still wet, that white will just kind of like disappear in there. Have you ever done that on a white rose? You're painting on something and then you put the white on and it just disappears. Well, with acrylics we have the advantage. You can either thicken up your paint, or with the acrylics we have the advantage letting it tack up a little bit, dry up a little bit, and then we can paint right up on top of it and reset it. And you know, now all these colors, these tones in here, they're not perfect, but they become a benchmark tone. They kind of tell us where we're going in this area, and we can paint to it. So what I did was I took my photo that I had there and I made a larger blow up of it here for the head, so I can show you guys a little bit of the detailing and how I like to do the detailing. Problem is this blue tape that I use here, which is good to stick to a painting because it won't take anything off. Doesn't like to stick when there's a lot of extender around, so we might have to reposition that a couple times. But let's bring the camera in, guys, and then this will let us maybe a little bit more, and we'll move this over aside here. And then we'll bring the palette up right over here so you guys can see the palette, and then we'll work here. I'll show you what kind of working and detailing that I'm going to do up into this this particular area. And I'll go in, I'm going to start, and this is the thing, you know, you can start anywhere. You can continue to refine and feather. A lot of wildlife painters will go right to the subject, which is going to be this eye and this area on the owl, this area here. And so a lot of them would head there, and I'm going to do that first. I'm going to take my small, and I usually, when I do small areas, I work between small synthetics and small fusion. This is a fusion, this is a synthetic. And I like to use those rather than rounds. Rounds will sometimes give you a line of color that an edge or a texture that I don't always like to work over. So, and I'm going to take some violet and some of this red that's right here and make just a real dark tone here. And I'll use my bridge here. And I'm just going to come in and start some of the, and I'll use sometimes pulling down strokes and sometimes just kind of pulling around to give the detail here around the eye ring here, his eye ring, and this nice dark color. This eye over here, you'll mostly see it as dark here, so we'll fill a lot of that in basically there, like that. Okay. And, you know, little things that you will notice and the things that I want to teach you how to see for this thing. The eye is going to be very light. So, and it's mostly a Diarylide Yellow. So let's take a Diarylide Yellow, maybe a little bit of Hansa, and make sure your brush is really clean. Let's rinse that out really well. And so the Diarylide Yellow, which is a nice glowy kind of color, a little bit of Hansa, and maybe just the tiniest bit of white. You don't want to use too much because white will take the glow away from the eye. But let's just push that right into the eye here. Okay. First, and that's getting us close. We need to have some modeling of color, maybe some Diarylide, maybe a touch of yellow oxide right into it down here, down low. And usually what I'll do is I'll put some of this on, then I'll let it dry up and do it again, and we'll get a little closer and a little closer. So now, you know, and this is the thing that I always find. I put the color on once, then my eye starts to see even more. Like, you know, you'll see it darker right here, and then look over to this side, you'll see it a little bit lighter right there. So really what we need is some more darkness over in that one side, and Diarylide is probably enough, but it'll take a couple of times to go through there to get that Diarylide over there. And you know, when you're working with this, Diarylide is a beautiful yellow that I use mostly in a lot of animal portrait eyes for the glow, but it takes a couple of times to really get it to where you want that orangey kind of color. Sometimes you might want to add just the tiniest little touch of Naphthol Red Light, which will give you just a little bit of that orangey glow, just a bit there into that, a little bit better, close to it. But then one of the things, now I want you all to look real careful, because this is something that a lot of people forget to put into their animal paintings, and you can actually see it right here. This is the cast shadow from the upper eyelid. Do you see it running right across there on the eye? So, but to put that in, we have to really let this eye tack up and dry, so we'll do that. But I'm gonna work a nice small pupil of the eye right up over here, real careful. Just real careful. Nice little pupil of the eye there. And we'll have to put, now you see that, see the difference between mine and this one here, that cast shadow that's there. We could have a little bit more of the downstroke here, a little bit wider downstroke right here, slightly more of an angle. Most of this is, you know, putting some of this stuff on and then, you know, refining down and seeing what it is. Now I'm going to let that eye dry up. I'm nowhere near done. I'm going to let that eye dry up while we work some other colors around. And because I just put in probably too much, and I'll show you how to correct that. Okay, you know, this is the thing about painting, guys. What we do is I don't get so involved into the absolute detail right away. I take it a step closer, and then I'll take it a step closer, and I'll go back and correct some areas where like I just did here, put too much. Okay, now, so from the eye, I work out into the eye socket, and I know there's an eye socket in here, and I know those colors are in there, and they're very soft. So we'll take some of our burnt siennas and stuff, and you can see, even though it's been an hour and a half since I painted on here, where I had all this extender is still very much wet. See all that? And I had some of that extender with my cool color there, so that's still there. Let's take some of this warm with just a little bit of cool here. See what that tone is. That's not too bad. It'll be a little dark, but we'll lighten it back up. So I'm going to come right around, and I know that eye socket's in here. So what I do, and I know that upper lid there, but that eye socket, this is all that eye socket. So I know there is the eye socket on him. And, you know, because the owls have them. All animals have them. So I'll push some of that in, and then we'll lighten back up to what we see. So after I do that, I'll come over here, I'll grab a little light color, a little bit of that socket color there. We'll come back up. Let's put the upper eyelid right up here onto him, here, and that tonal stroke right up there, here, okay. And let's put the lower tonal stroke on here, the lower. So, and work that in, lightly work that in, right into the bottom, leaving a bit of that socket color there. Let's take just a bit of that, and we'll pull out. So, and you've seen me do this in a lot of birds. I pull out on the back, I cross the top of the eye, and then I pull out on the back, and I circle around the bottom. And that's a great way I have found over time to paint the sockets. What I like to do. I'm going to put a little gray, not quite as light, because this socket's not quite as light, and just lightly with the tip. This is nice. With just the tip of this little fusion filbert, I can put what I call these just little feathering strokes in there to put some movement in there. And after you put that movement, see, my eye starts focusing down on where the movement and stuff is. I'm going to come right in here, and I'm going to build that movement stroke in here a little bit more. Yeah, right in there. I start to see, as you start to look, you start to see highs and lows. It's really hard, but you start to see highs and lows as your eye becomes more adjusted to what is the small changes on this owl. So there's a bigger eye socket stroke right up here on top here, and it comes down, actually down. That's a little too far. Goes down towards his nose right there. And let's build that, and then let's take a little cooler, some of that eye socket color right here, and define that just a bit there. So you can see that tone. It's not perfect yet, but you can see that right in there and right in there. And that's what I work on trying to get. There's just a little tiny dollop of light color that kind of comes right down here that we kind of want to hit, just like that. That you can see that there on him. And as you get more refined with this, you'll get better and better at seeing some of this stuff. Now that eye is just about dry there. Let's take a burnt sienna and some of this shadow color. It's not a complete, dark tone. As a matter of fact, that has too much white in it. See how gray that is? I don't want to do it with the gray. I want to have a little bit more of a burnt sienna. Maybe burnt sienna, a little bit of our Diarylide here. Then we can add a touch of that shadow. So this is a little bit too cloudy compared to that other. And I know that's a lot. For beginners, that's hard to see that difference. But that'll push this eyeshadow to the top up there of the eye. Now, I'm pretty good, but his face is bigger than this one, so that's one thing. But I want to restate some of that light Diarylide and white right up into the front up here. So, and remember, mine's just a little smaller than what you see in the photo. So the photo one is just a little bit bigger. So that puts him up. I want to get this eye really nice. And matter of fact, I was talking with my daughter at lunch, and she was like, "Ooh, I love those tones." And I said, I'm going to put a little more into this one than I normally do and really put those textures in and stuff. So hopefully we can film this a little bit more. You know, it's whether or not we go to another video. I know you guys don't like to, some of you don't. Some of you comment that you really love it. And some people complain that my videos get too long. So, but I'm going to take this a little bit more and really show you guys some of the stuff. So I want that light right up there, right up into that front. And see, I like leaning on that edge of that filbert. That's where I like it. The reason why I like that filbert, see, is I can use the point for detail, like the pupil of the eye, but I can push it kind of flat and pull that stroke, or I can use it on the chisel edge. Like I'll take just a bit of this dark here, a little bit of that red, right on the chisel edge here. And I'll find that chisel real light, right down like that. Find that chisel and put that detail in on the lower eye. And so then I'll maybe put a little more light right down on the lower lid here, just a bit, right down here, right with that chisel, right in here, little detail. You don't have to be perfect because it's all going to look great. I'm not quite as pointed as he is right out there, so I'll take this dark and reset this dark out here till I point up his eye just a touch more. And you can do this, you know, this is a lot easier with a round. And you can do that with the round. That's up to you. You know, I like to use the small filbert, and that's what my favorite is. I'm going to take a little more Diarylide here on the back side of this eye. Right in there. There we go. That's a little better. And it's that Diarylide is darkening it down slightly, and it will continue to darken it down. So I might take just a touch of the Diarylide Hansa and white again. Just a whisper of it. And this is why I don't repaint everything. What I do when I do that is just tap it lightly, guys, right into the area and start adding some of the light. And sometimes I like that. Like, see, I got that little shine spot in there. I like that. And I may like that sometimes more than I do the photo because it adds a little bit more life to the eye of the owl. And, you know, that's up to you whether or not you leave that. I'm going to darken, take a little violet and darken that. I'm going to put a little bit of that violet over here, and I'm going to tap in and darken that pupil just a bit there, right like that, a little bit more here. You see I'm using just the tip of that soft fusion, and that's what I like to use. Now, in doing so, I made the pupil a little bit too big. And so you got to say, you know, do you adjust that? You know, it takes only a couple seconds, guys, to do that. So, and that's what I do. This is what, you know, the difference between, and I look this, the difference when I started selling my paintings and the difference between a $300 painting and a $3,000 painting is you go back and you correct that. So we go back and we push that light in, tap that light in, to push that back in and get that color back into there. So, and it's just a way to, whatever you want to do. Now there is a catch light, a tiny, tiny little catch light right to the back. This will probably be too big. And so I'll push that catch light on there, and, you know, you can see, obviously see that the pupil is off round slightly on mine in doing that with that catch light. So I'll just tap in a little tiny bit of dark. And again, it is a lot easier with the round, but I don't always do that. So I like the interest of that eye. It's not exactly the same. This one is a lot more yellow right up here into the front, a little bit wider. But this is a bigger, his head here is bigger than my head that I have there. But I love the interest in that eye. And so that's, you know, I like that it's a little bit more painterly. I don't have a perfect eye ring like that you see in the original there. And I could make that a little bit more perfect, but I do like the painterly, which the painterly means that it has the broken edges to it, and I like that, those broken edges to it. So I might leave that for right now, and you know, we'll continue on and we'll build, and then you know, we can come back and look at it and see if we want to do something. Because you take that away, he's got a lot of interest to his eye. All right, so I'm going to come in and go back to like a number 6 or so. This is a number 6 fusion filbert, and take some of my light, a little bit of my yellow, my light. This is over towards my warms here. Okay, just a bit of this warm color here, not a pure white, but getting up there. And let's come in and build the top part of his socket here a bit more. We're going to paint this multiple tones. And so what we want to do is, so when I push like this, when I'm looking for, see how when I push like that, a little bit of that cooler gray came through? That's what I'm looking for. So we're going to look for 2 things now. We're going to look that we can get this variety of tone happening across the plane. And then we're also going to be looking, seeing if we can find what is the best stroking pattern to mark for our marks. So I'll take this light. Let's go back here. Tiny bit lighter. I won't use the same tone over and over again because that will just cause this thing to go flat. Maybe a little cool into that. Okay. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to start stroking across, finding how his forehead works. And let's put in a little more cool here. So we follow the contour. We call these contour following strokes, marks. And I will come over here a little bit more cool. Here, finding that coming down this side right here. Okay, and I'll push up to incorporate that into the other marks of his head there. And so you can see I start to build his head, and this usually takes a few times. So I'll do this a couple times here, through like this. And, you know, so this is a slightly different tone. It's a little bit lighter. I'm using it a little bit smaller, okay? And I'll go back to my warmer tone right here for a moment. Right down his nose. Okay. Right down into there. Kind of follow, look close and see if you can find the feathering to find his shape, the shape and stuff that you're going to build up there. Let's build a little bit more with some warmer lights right here. Let's build up this area, which is one of the areas that we really want to advance. So I'm really going to go eventually quite light and quite textured in that area of his eye, which is going to be this area right in here. That's going to be one of the most forward parts that we want. So we're going to want to lay on some texture with the right color, with the right contour following mark. That's the best way to say it here. As I build this, each time the mark is a little different tone, change it up a bit. Okay, let's get back slightly to our warmer right in here. Push some of that mark in, right in there, okay? And we can go, you can see some of that warmer tone picking up in here now. And we'll model this between some of these yellows and lights. And what I do is I start short stroking, stepping it out, and this will start feathering him up. See? That'll start feathering him up. We want to get some of the structures though correct. But first, before I go do that, let's take that dark again. Let's go phthalo and a really nice dark phthalo and Naphthol Red Light, almost 1-to-1, somewhere right around in here. Let's put in the dark part of the beak, which actually you see just a hit of it way up here, softer, and then it comes down, right down here like this, into this point right here. Okay, right into that point. And then we'll set the feathers and stuff over the top of that. So you'll see that. Let's, while I have that, let's round up the top part of this eye just a bit more. Here. Boom. There we go. That takes him just a little corner. It's a little bit rounded. This is a little bit more flat. That's just a little bit more round, but I like it, so I'll leave it, you know. But you can see it, but you know, sometimes frustration is going to come if you get too much into a copy. If you like it and like the way it looks and it looks pretty good, move on, you know. You can always come back and address it later, but move on. Let's go back to our lighter color right here. Let's find that contour, stroking in the contour, rounding up into, and let some of that color come into his face there. Okay, and again, this is an area that I might want to really build a little bit of that texture coming in there and leave a few little textured marks in there. Now when you see that light, you can see how toned that socket is. Okay, now see the little shadow tone here for the socket. Let's drop in that little curved jawline here, and it's going to come up like this. That's a nice little shadow tone. And then it'll push a little bit more. It'll come up right up underneath here, underneath this beak. It's going to come down this eye socket here, and let's thin that just a bit. It's a little, and cool it just a bit. As we get down here, let's cool it even more. As we head to the shadows, we're going to cool it even more. Cool it off with that cool. A little more blue, a little bit of violet into it, okay? And then it gets really cool, more blue, down over here, down into this area here. So you can see I break this apart. Here comes this little shadow line. That's going to go up that part of his head there. Okay. And break this cool and warm kind of chase color right into there. So all of this, guys, is, you know, it's a building process, see? So that's all it is a building process. Let's take some of this cool. Darker, that's cool. Come up over here, clean up and round up just a bit. Get this cooler part of his head over there, like that. And we can take some lighter cool color, right like this. And I use just the tip of this filbert, and I can pull out like this. And eventually I'll use I have a little light feathering brush, I'll show you, but I use it to draw even more feathers. Right now I want to get some of those tones correct. And so sometimes I'll go back and forth with the tone, with the light and the dark here, until I get the tone right about where I want. And so I can have, you know, I slowly get it into position here. A little more dark right there. There, like that. So now I can come back. Let's take some of our light, a little bit of our warm here. Let's build, we'll come on, leave a little bit of that mark, and let's build up this kind of cheek area down. And you see his feathers pulling down there, like that. Okay. And we'll get a little bit lighter. Let's push that in, right in there, a little bit lighter. And sometimes you'll see me do this as I load this up. I'll hold this very flat and it gives me a different type of feathering mark here, like this. And you'll see these kind of pull down just a bit right there. I need, you can see it's cooler here than it is there. It's very warm right there, and it's cooler. See it bluer right there. And for some of you, this is all a learning. You're learning how to see, and and it takes a bit, guys. It takes time to learn how to see some of these changes of warms and cools. But you can do it. You can start to do it here. Let's take some of this little bit of warm. We'll pull across this a bit here. And you start to find the shapes. Look real close to the shapes of his face. He's going to have this eye socket is going to build up a bit. Okay? And then light little tips here. Pull some of this down, and this will start some of his feathering. Just the tip, just the very tip of that soft little the fusion filbert is what I like. And I'll sometimes just turn it on an edge, on the chisel. But you can see, you can start giving some of the suggestions there of those feathers, which is pretty neat. Here, just light little marks there. Let's bury that little mark a little bit more. There we go. A little bit more. It could be just a touch more, but there, like that. And when I finally come in with textures, this is where I'll finally answer some of these these nice feather marks with texture later on. Not there yet, but this is going to get us closer here. And a little bit down, a little bit darker value, but just right along that edge there. And that kind of comes up a little bit. So you can go back and forth with the light and dark, and there's a bit of a lighter little mark right in here above the eye and below the eye socket and above the cheek. And I'm building that in there. So you can see it's starting to feather him up. That's what I'm looking for. Let's go to a cooler light. Push some of that right out over here. So a little cool and light. Push that out. There's just a hint of warmth pulling this way across the eye. Light color, warmer color. Right there. You can see it pulling across the eye there. And this is, you know, really in a painting, when you're doing an animal portrait like this, this is the part that I'll spend the most time in, especially around my center of interest, which is going to be right up here in the face. And I really like to slow down and capture these tones. And sometimes, because of simultaneous contrast, this is going to take you, wow, quite a bit of time to find and to work out these tones. So, you know, to nail them down, to get them exactly what they need to be to do that. And then it's going to dry down, and you might have to redo some of it as it dries down. That's just always one of the hazards that happens, is it dries down maybe a little more than you thought, and so you end up having to do just a little bit more there. Okay, so let's slide into a little more cool right down in here, but slightly lighter. Get some of that in there. That's pretty good. Working that. See, see that tiny light little edge right there. So I'll just tap a little bit of light right onto the edge of this filbert. Roll it right over onto that edge and push that light in, and then I can start running my finger over it until I like the blurriness of it. It could come up a little bit higher. So I'll roll it over and go up a little bit higher, right up there, and look to see if I like that or not. And yes, build in some of these lighter little bits of the strokes. And you see I hold different parts of the brush down as I do this. And I'm looking for some of that streaks. Some of those streaks. There's the afternoon train coming through. And push that around. Work those colors around here. And now you can also add this open medium. This is the Diarylide open medium that I have right here that I put out, and the Matisse Diarylide, and so this will keep this area really wet. So if I really want to work an area several times with tone, I'll start adding the Matisse open medium into it, and it allows me to push through, and it's going to keep these tones really wet as I build them up. And it's nice, not like extender. It extends it like extender, but even longer than extender. But it's nice because it's thicker, and so it'll hold the stroke color longer. So I can push that in, and as I restate some of my light colors here, I'm always restating those lights because they always seem to dry down a little bit more than what I liked. And so I'll restate them, pushing those in. And we'll come up, like right up in through here is where it's all going to be dappled up and stuff. So maybe we'll push a little bit of that light out here, like that. And see, the open medium you can push. And I call that incorporate the colors. I'm not blending the colors together, I'm pushing it. And the way in which I like my students to visualize this is like marbleizing, like you're pushing the veining and stuff and marble around. You don't want to push it to where they blend and create another color. You want to just incorporate and push them around together so that they soften their visual interest. And so that's what I do. So you can see they're still there. It's just I've incorporated multiple colors together, see? And that takes time. But let's take our smaller and let's go burnt sienna and blue, which will cool that down and darken that down. And let's see where we are. Maybe start adding. We want to go right about out in here. Some of the dappling that's going to happen here. A little cooler so on this side over here. So a little bit more blue. Okay. A little bit more blue and slightly warmer and stuff over here. So a little bit more burnt sienna can start out right over here. Okay. Just try to capture the impression of it. Now, what I do when I do this kind of dappling like this is I put on too much. And I know I put on too much. And sometimes the little areas go a little solid and stuff, but I'm going to paint them out. Now, follow the contours. You see this following the contours there as well. So follow your contours here. You're turning your brush down because it's coming down the side of his face. His face is slightly foreshortened here. So we have to come down the side of his face here. So we'll dapple this up a bit. Pull a few across, pull a few back, and there are too many, and I'll take care of that in just one moment, okay? So I've got it a little heavier overall. It's captured some of the feeling a little heavier. Now I'll just pinch wipe my brush, and I'll pick up some of the light with here into some of that warm. I'll model this into the brush, wipe it a couple of times, pick it up, okay? And let's come back in this time with the light coming back in. And on a real detailed painting, I may repeat this, 2 or 3 times until I capture the look that I wanted here. As you go around the corner, you have to pick up a little cool color. But I'll go back and forth. Sometimes I'll pull through just to blur it a bit, And over here, as you go around the corner, grab some of the light with a little bit of your cool color so you don't lose your cool color. maybe a touch lighter. And we'll do that through this area there. And sometimes a little bit of warmth, maybe a little bit of yellow with this. Change it up so it's not pure white. Let's take out some with a bit of that yellow as well. And if you cake out too many, guess what you do? You go back and put them back in until you start to capture a little closer to, you go back and forth till you get a little closer to the look that he has here. So let's push some of that back in and get a little closer, maybe a few little spots of light here. Right in there like that. And, you know, he's a little bit thicker, a little bit warmer up over here. I know that. Sometimes I'll push up into him like this too, just to create a different mark. So I'm not always creating like a straight, you know, like a dot or something like that. So I'll push the brush so it gives me a different look. Let's just add a little bit here. And on a real detailed one, pretty one, you might sit down and do this for 30 minutes to an hour so you can get, I mean, you can get some, you can see a little bit of the warms and cools going through there. I like that. And that just adds more interest to, and use some of that burnt sienna and then more blue as you go over to that side. And it makes a real pretty little markings on him there. And then you come on back into here and do that, and we'll come on back, you know, back up into this corner back here. What we do is, like up underneath his wing, is you'll see it's in the shape of V's. So you go down, you go out, you come, you know, more of a point there, Dave. Come back in, go out, and then you need to have some variation there. Like I need to have some burnt sienna and a little yellow variation to some of this warmer. So you see those colors a little warmer. And again, put on too much, too many as you start putting those on. Put on too many and then paint out, and then go back and paint out. The thing is that it makes the best edges and the prettiest elements in your painting is to paint back and forth with that, and let those edges cross over, cross over, cross over. And that's what gives it the most interest. And I've found that over time. So, yeah, just tap some of that in. Let's tap some of that warm in there. Too much. I have a little too much, but that's okay. I know I can change it. Go back in with a little blue. Change that up a bit. Those marks. This little number 2 Fusion filbert is absolutely perfect for this. Put in some warm marks. Maybe some warmth. Some of that warmth can come right up in here. This is where we'll start adding some of those smaller ones. And what I do is I just kind of quickly glance at the photo there, and then I go up to the other. So it's not going to be a copy. It doesn't need to be a copy. I just need to capture the feeling of it. So I'll put on too many. You know me, I'll put on too many. That's what I like to do. Put on too many. Here. Just like that. Try not to forget to breathe and stuff. And I get a general feeling for it, and I don't want to... It becomes very stiff if you try to copy too much. So catch a general feeling for it. Let's go back to our little bit whiter and some of our warm color here. And now I'll push and take out some of them. as I start to paint the contours of this little owl here, see, I'll push those colors in. And it's that crossing, guys. It's that crossing of the colors and the highs and lows of the warm whites and the cool whites. You know, that gives you all of this beautiful interest. Let's tone this down, yellow it down just a bit, because we're in that brown area. So we want some of that brown tone to come out in this. That warm tone we made on the first video. We want some of that to come out in here, right? And when you look at this, you know, when I first started, if you go back, one of the hardest owls that I think there is to paint is the one I did in an earlier video that the big, what's his name left me? Well, he's on an earlier video there, and he's got this all this mottled up chest, the great horned owl, the great horned owl. And so I did him in a video here on the channel, and that chest, as you look at it and you just go, oh my gosh, how long is that going to take you to paint? And it really doesn't take very long at all when you use this kind of technique. And this is the reason why I love acrylics, because I can paint back and forth with the acrylics like this, and since I'm painting tones, the warms and the cools and stuff, and I can just slide color like this, it works together so well, and I don't blend too much or anything like that. It works pretty nice. So I'll work a little bit of that warm tone coming back up here. Change your tone around a bit. Then let's go back and let's just lighten it a little bit. Some of that light tone coming back in here. And it'll dry down and look a touch different, and you might have to you know, come in there and add some more. Like I can see I could use some more light pulled down strokes right in here to build that shoulder up here towards his mantle here. Right up there. I could use a bit of that light there, and that light could travel a bit more down here towards these marks here. There, like that, see? And you know, it's all in how you do it there, you know. Now, as I look at this too, my eye cuts across just a bit. That one swoops down just a bit more. Darn it. So it's like, do you change it? I do like the eye the way it is, but you can see that it does do that. And do you want to dip it down just a little bit more? And you would start with like painting out a little bit of light, then put the yellow and put the eye ring down. Well, let's just correct it. So I'm going to take a darker eye ring color, my blue and my red here, darker eye ring color. And so you see, you know, you may not see all of this stuff right away, but as you get a little further into the painting, you start seeing it. We'll sneak up on this. Dip it down just a bit more. There we go. And then I'm going to, and the easiest way to do it with an acrylic is to take a bit of white, maybe even tint it over a little bit of Diarylide. But you need that white for the opacity, because Diarylide is not an opaque color, and that'll paint out some of that. There we go. And the eye's a little bit more contrasty than the other one, because there's more Diarylide around it, but that will dry down. And if you want to get more of that perfect glow, then you just wash a little more Diarylide over it. I like the way that kind of looks, so I think I'm going to leave that. But as you go back up over here, let's go back towards our cools and our blues here, okay? And let's drop that in here. Fix up that part of him there. Okay, maybe a bit more, just some marks over here. Let that finish off that side there. Not exactly the same, but pretty darn good. And as we get into here, so the eye, his wing comes in just a little bit above the eye. It's coming in here quite a bit above the eye here. So I've got that slope a little bit too high. What do? You go, this is where I take you right back to some of my base colors that I really worked into here. And I'm just going to paint this down and pull across here and work that. And this is where I just kind of scrub up and see, and I'll blur up. And sometimes I'll take some extender like this, and then I just use the brush and I push it up like this to create some of that modeling, and push like that, and so that just it softens it out. It doesn't blend it, it softens it out. And that's why I say once we have that blur in there, we can keep that blur. And that works so very well. Let's just keep that. And I got a few marks here from my board. So I'll just take some of those out here. Like that, see? And that just gives it, and this is really, and it's softer right up there. That big burnt sienna is right in here. I'll show you how to correct that. Let's get a little more burnt sienna right in here. I love that burnt sienna, because we're really going to paint some of that inside of him. So I like that little color showing up right in there. We'll go over just a bit. And on the, on the photo, that looks pretty good. On the monitor back there, you can see that wing area right up in there. Okay, looks lighter, doesn't it? So I have to decide, do I like that? Do I like the way he is coming forward? Let's step the camera back just a bit. Do I like the way that he is coming forward there, or do I want to carry some of that lightness back there? Let's just take a look. Take a little cool color. Some of this. Little extender. Okay. And let's just walk into that a little bit. And see, this is the subtle workings of it that I like to do in my backgrounds. And always leave room that I can do this kind of stuff in my backgrounds. Let's go, we had that background was more of a light violet. Let's grab some of that for a second. Doesn't have to be the same color, guys. Don't make the same color. Because you make the same color, you just kill the painting. You want a slightly different color. I'm going to go a little lighter and a little bit more violet here. And I'm just going to work this just with my brush right in here like this. Okay. And then I'll soften through. You could take your big brush and blur through. I'll soften through and create that other illusion right in here. See, I have stuff. Let's just create that. This is what I like to do. And yeah, and sometimes on some paintings, see the difference here. See how that's all pushed back. But see, I love that. I love that working there of those particular colors right in there like that. So, it's kind of up to you. So as I come through this way into the body, that's what I'm going to do with this the body of the owl right in here is continue to work just those particular colors, just like that. So these are all you see, these feathering strokes, is you have your cool, a little bit of warm, and then another stroke. So I'll take a bit of cool, maybe a bit of extender, or the very best thing to do as you start some of these is to add the open medium. That's going to give you a little bit of body to it, okay? So I'll add that cool right in here like that. With that open medium, let that just kind of slide in there, okay? Go up on top of that, right up here with a little bit of your warm. This is the burnt sienna with the green. Put a little bit of a few strokes of the warm there, right up like that, right up on top of that, okay? You're emulating this area, right? Then what do you see? A few strokes of light. So come right down here, just tap in a little bit of light into it, and then just work the strokes, short stroke, following the contours of the body here. Step them apart a little bit so you get some of the feathering look to it. Does that make sense? try to find the contours here. There's a little bit more of a contour right here. Follow that in right there, okay? And see if you can kind of match up his contour, your contour strokes with his contour stroke. It doesn't have to be perfect though. Don't get rid of the spontaneity of the stroke by trying to copy it too much, and then you end up overpainting it and it all becomes white. And if that happens, you have to go back to the cool, back to the warm, and you have to do it all over again. So, you know, just start to get it a little closer. That's the way we do it, a little closer here. And find some of those tones and stuff here. Okay. And as we get back into a shadow area, we'll do a darker tone. So in here, so it's the brown, it's a burnt sienna and blue in the darker tone. And in the light area, it's more burnt sienna. You can see it warmer. More burnt sienna, and then your lighter, warmer colors. And you follow that pattern so that you can see the cast shadow. That's how you do that, okay? So that's what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a few minutes and do this. And I think what I'm going to do, if you don't mind, is I'm going to break this into one more video. So we're not quite, almost to 2 hours here, not quite at that. But it gets to be a little bit long. But that's enough long detail and stuff for you on that. And then I'll break this into another video. We'll put that one up tomorrow. And so you can see the final finishing of it. I'd rather you take your time with this and enjoy that. And we'll put one more up for you and show you. That'll give me some more time to show you a little bit more detailing on the feathers rather than trying to rush this, okay? All right, guys. So I'll work on this. I'll show you a few clips of this, either at the end of this one or the beginning of the next one. I'll show you a few clips of this, and then we'll go right into the next, which will be a part 3 of this, okay? All right, I'll see you over on that one. Thanks a lot.